Hi, I'm Nush from YB Aligned. No, I've not grown wings, but for this week's Movement Monday, we are going to be looking at the lower back and specifically our lumbar spine. Now, the lumbar spine is the section of spine that lives in our lower back. It's these vertebrae you can see here, 5 of them, and they sit on top of and actually connect to our pelvis. You can see here the middle of the pelvis is called the sacrum, and this vertebra here is sitting right on top of the sacrum, and that's going to be an important thing to bear in mind for today. First of all, let's have a look at how that lumbar spine moves and the shapes it might make in our lower back. First of all, let's have a little look at our side-on or sagittal plane. You can see here as the body sort of goes forward and comes back, we're getting that arch in the lower back, which is closing all the vertebrae at the back and opening them at the front, and that's called extension. And then as the body moves forward, the vertebrae are starting to close on the front, open on the back, and that is called flexion, and that's going to make a flatter back. The extension gives us that curve in our lower back, and the flexion gives us the flatter lower back. Next, we have our frontal or front-on plane. You can see here the body is bending to the side, and the movement is actually called lateral flexion, which means side bending. So it's lateral flexion left, where the vertebrae close on the left and open on the right, and then lateral flexion right. We're starting to close on the right-hand side and open on the left. And this gives us a lovely sort of curving or side bend in our lower back. And then lastly, we have our transverse, or as I call it, our twisty-turny plane of movement, and this is our rotation. Basically, you can see here the spine is rotating one way and rotating the other way. Now, what is interesting to note here is each vertebrae will move slightly, and the one above will always move a little bit more than the one below. So you'll get smaller movements at the base of the spine, and at the top of that lumbar section we're going to get more. And this is literally a rotational movement in the body. Now, as we saw at the top of the video, the lumbar spine connects directly into our pelvis via our sacrum here. So whatever our pelvis is doing is going to dictate what's happening in the lumbar spine. And on the flip of that, we can actually use the movement of the pelvis to get more movement into that lumbar spine. So in our sagittal or side-on plane, we know that the extension of the spine is where we've got this curvature. The front of the vertebrae are open and the back are closed. If I wanted to encourage that movement into the body, I can use my pelvis and I can roll and tip that pelvis forward, and you can see how that's making that curvature in the lower back. And if I want to make the opposite movement, that flexion or flattening of the spine, I can think about tucking my tailbone, if I do that with my finger, between my legs. So it's sending that down and sending the top of the pelvis backwards. And as I do that, you can see my back is starting to flatten. So it means the vertebrae are opening on the back of the body here and closing on the front. So you can move between the two. We can send this pelvis, if I do this, roll it forwards and over to get that extension in the spine and the curve in the lower back, and then tailbone going down to the floor and under between the legs, sending the pelvis back in this motion, which is going to give us flexion of the spine, closing at the front of the body and opening at the back of the body. In our frontal or front-on plane, we know we're looking for that curvature in the spine. Now, I like to say it looks almost like a bracket or a C shape. So something that's a curved or a half moon. Think of that shape. That's what we're looking for. Now, we want to create it with the pelvis because we know that the lumbar spine is coming and sitting into the top of my pelvis here. So when I move my pelvis, it's going to move that bottom vertebra, which moves the other ones above. So if I think about bending this knee, I'm going to start to bend it outwards and sort of thinking about it pulling this thigh bone to the floor. So as I bend my knee down, my thigh bone is being pulled down, which is pulling the hip and pulling the pelvis. So I've now got this lovely tilting in my pelvis. This side is down, this side is up. And with this little tilt here, it means the vertebrae is facing this direction. And so the one above is having to curve over, and gradually they curve to form this C shape or bracket or half moon. And that is our lateral flexion. Now, what would be happening here is they would be opening on this side. The joints of the vertebrae would be opening on this side and closing on this side. And you can almost see that in my t-shirt. I'm getting a bunching in this side, whereas it opens and flattens here. And now if I pop that up, my spine straightens. Now, if I bend this knee, it's going to pull this thigh bone to the floor. We're getting that tilt in the pelvis. And now the spine is getting a chance to bend back the other way. And so you would go from one to the other, knee bending, knee bending. Now, what you do want to be careful of is that you're not, as you bend your knee, you're not popping your bum out to the side, because actually that means I'm not getting any movement in my spine here. It's staying quite a straight line. Whereas if I just bend it down, I've got this compensatory C curve. If I bend it but pop it out to the side, this is staying straight. So it's just an up and down movement in that pelvis, no side to side. And lastly, we have our transverse plane, which is our rotational or turning plane of movement. So we're looking to almost get like a spiral staircase in the spine. The vertebrae move one on top of the other in this, it's not as huge as this, but in this turning motion like that. So we want to get them, so one is turned a bit more, this is turned a little bit more. So it will like fan the spine round like a spiral staircase in this lower lumbar section of the spine. So the easiest way to do this is to rotate the pelvis round to the left and round to the right. So you could imagine you were standing in the middle of a clock. You're going to send your pelvis round towards 1 or 2 o'clock and 11 or 10 o'clock. Now the trick here, in order to actually get the rotation in your spine, is that you have to leave your rib cage and shoulders facing forwards. If I let my whole body move, I'm not getting any movement in this spine. Whereas when I just send my pelvis, I hold on to my shoulders, I'm now getting this rotation. And again, you can see creases starting to form on my t-shirt as I do this. I get creases one way, creases the other way. Whereas if I send my whole upper body, I might have creases, but they're not moving. So we want these creases that form like a towel being wrung out. And that's going to give us that lovely movement in our lower back. So those are the planes of movements or the motions of our lumbar spine. You've seen them on the skeleton and you've seen them within my body as well. And hopefully you can make the connection that if we're unable to access those movements in a good range and nice and fluidly, that is going to have an effect on our lower back. We might feel tightness, we might feel compression, we might even feel pain. So in order to move freely in that lower back, you've got to get that lumbar spine moving. Thank you for joining me for this week's Movement Monday. I hope you've enjoyed it and it's been beneficial for you. Don't forget to like the video and save it so you can find it later. But also follow along, subscribe so that you don't miss out on next week's Movement Monday.